morning, friends. So this is the 107th annual meeting of an organization that used to be called the Newton Chamber of Commerce. So 107 years ago for the Newton Chamber of Commerce. It's the 54th annual meeting for the organization that used to be called the Newton Needham Chamber. But this morning you are here at the first meeting of what's now known as the Charles River Regional Chamber, including Newton Needham and our new friends in Watertown and Wellesley. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I wanted to thank you all for being here. I am so happy to see all of you and really grateful. And that's the comment I heard from people coming in too, is how happy everyone is to see everyone. To our longtime friends, longtime members, we missed you. To our new friends, we're so happy to have you here. Thank you very much for being part of this. My name is Greg Riedman. I have the honor of being the president of your chamber. 10 years, if you can believe it, 10 years. Yeah. We haven't done this in 3 years, so you're gonna have to indulge me. We've got a lot of people to thank and welcome. And I want to start. Dr. Errol Norwitz, are you here with the Newton Wellesley team? And John Fogarty, are you here? If you could stand and have your people stand from the BID Needham and the people from Newton Wellesley. Let's begin by thanking the medical professionals at our two hospitals, as well as everyone else in that field who did such a good job taking care of all of us over the last 2 years. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, clap again for that. That's worth it. Michael Alexander from LaSalle College is here. Michael, could you raise your hand? You know, Michael retiring this year after 16 years. Done transformational work at that campus right here in Auburndale. Really grateful to you and your team for being part of this. And my friend Linda Sloan Kay. We're so pleased and so happy to be honoring you and thanking you. What a great partnership we've had for so many years. Linda is the person who brought me into the chamber too, so we go back a long way and really appreciate it. Want to thank the Marriott and their staff. I mean, this is never easy to pull these things off, but pulling things off when you are short-staffed and struggle to hire and everything with the class and the fact that they were ready for us, and it's so nice. We're really grateful to the Marriott team for everything they did. I could spend the next 3 hours talking about how wonderful my staff is, the team that got us through all this, and I know Chris is going to acknowledge them later, but just thank you to the chamber team. Jeff Speck is in the house. Anyone here today experience any traffic coming in here? Yeah, a couple. Anybody here experience the joy of walking during shutdown and say, wow, you know, I've never really quite done this before, and discover their neighborhoods and things like that? Well, Jeff is here to talk to about how traffic doesn't have to be so infuriating and how walking can be so much more interesting. And he's got some great ideas, and we're really looking forward to that, Jeff. Thank you for being back with us again this year. I also want to acknowledge our municipal all-stars. Ruth Ann Fuller, Kate Fitzpatrick, Megan Jopp, and George Proakis are here with us today, and we'll be hearing from them later. We are so lucky to be in 4 municipalities that are really all well-run. It's extremely well-run. We're really fortunate to have that. And we're thankful to have the 4 of them. And also the elected officials from those 2 groups. We've got the Newton City Council, the Watertown City Council, the Needham Select Board, and the Wellesley Select Board all represented here. If you all could stand so we could thank you. I will not mention everyone by name, but I will acknowledge that we have Susan Albright, President of the City Council here, the Newton City Council, Mary Ann Cooley, Chair of the Needham Needham Select Board, Vince Picciarelli, Vice Chair of the Watertown Town Council, or City Council, they changed recently, and Lisa Only from the Chair of the Wellesley select board, and we're really appreciative of all of them. And, so we want you to know that we appreciate you, we appreciate your support, we appreciate what you've done for our business community over the last several years. But I also want to remind you all, especially our elected leaders, that we're not out of the woods yet. Our businesses are still extremely challenged by inflation, by hiring problems, from the cost of utilities, and all the other issues that have gone on. And we really can need your continued support and continued vigilance on everything from the kinds of fees we pay, the kinds of taxes we pay, getting permitting done, solving our grease trap problems, everything that needs to be done to help our businesses move forward in timely ways. So thank you for your help, and thank you for your continued help. It's really very important to all of us. I also wanted to just acknowledge, because I think it's so important, that we have with us today the folks from the Swellesley Report, from the Watertown News, and from the new Fig City News, an independent, free press, someone paying attention to our local media is so critical to all of us and deserves our support. We need those local reporters, and we've really I want to acknowledge that they're here with us today and that we value that. As well as our friends from New TV who are recording this to be broadcast on all our local cable access channels, and also we'll make it available to everyone who was not able to attend today. And then I need to thank the sponsors who made this possible for us today, without whom we could not have this event or anything that we do throughout the year. Needham Bank, Joe Campanelli, thank you very much. We'll be hearing from Joe in a little bit. And Joe DeVito and the Village Bank, our annual premier sponsor. Thank you to the Joe and their team. Direct Federal, grateful to you for your sponsorship this year. I met the folks from InSource that we've been doing so many webinars with, DeQual Graham and Siobhan Andrews from InSource. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the program that you've done for us this year. We really appreciate it. We learned so much from both of you and your teams. Jeff Knoyer is here with the team from the UMass Amherst Mount Ida campus. We got our friends from Grassi here, and we also have Mass General Brigham folks here, and our other additional sponsors, William James College, the West Suburban YMCA, Boston Children's Hospital, new to the chamber, coming to Needham shortly, we hope, right? And Cambridge Trust. So thank you. Please give them all a round of applause. So the last thing I need to do is bring on our chair of our board, Chris Teachout, in just a moment to say thank you to Chris. Chris stepped in when we had a transition change need to be our acting or interim chair for a year, and saved my neck, gave us some great support, great friendship, and we want to welcome Chris up to the stage right now. Thank you.
I haven't done this in a while. Last time I did this, I didn't need these. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Chamber's annual breakfast. Can everyone hear me? Hard to believe it's been 3 years since we were last here. I'm happy to announce that my suit still fits. I first want to take the opportunity to thank the folks that made the Chamber run on a daily basis. Catherine, Lise, Maxim, and Tracy, you're a big part of why the Chamber is so successful and a big part of why Greg is so successful. I know I speak for the entire board when I say thank you for all the work you do. Please. In addition to the amazing staff of the Chamber, we have an equally outstanding board of directors that help guide Greg and his team as we continue forward. At this point, I would like to ask the current directors to stand and be recognized. Take some credit. One thing we always keep in mind is that we would not be here today if not for the efforts of the directors that came before us. Would all former directors please stand and take some credit for helping us get to where we are. As Greg mentioned, this is my second time occupying the seat of chair of the board. It's been a humbling experience yet again. One of the keys to being successful is knowing when to offer help and knowing when to stay out of the way. Those are two things that our new chair will need to learn. Starting January 1, I'm happy to announce that John Rufo of Forms in Place will be taking over as chair. John has been a member of the board and the executive committee for some time and is ready to take on this next role. I am confident that the chamber will continue its success with his input and guidance. Next year, I'll be winding down my tenure as a board member for the chamber. I fondly remember my first interview as a candidate for a board position. Sitting in Linda Kaye's office in Newton, having no real idea what to expect. Linda was warm, kind, informative, and clearly passionate about the chamber and what it represented. She has been a champion of our cause for as long as I've known her, which is why her award today is so deserved. I would now like to introduce the person who will be presenting the R.L. Tennant Award. I'm sure most of you know Mark. He's been a fixture in the community and has been involved with the chamber and its board for many years. Widely recognized for his knowledge, wisdom, insight, and taste in music. It's my pleasure to introduce Mark Sokol.
He's, of course, referring to the Grateful Dead, because I don't really think there is any other music. I heard a speaker once get away with this line. I'd just like to say a few words before I begin speaking. So, sounds like it'll work. So I just want to take a moment to welcome a very special person, Lily Rabinoff-Goldman, who is the new CEO of JCC Greater Boston, a job from which I retired a while ago. Lily? And uniquely and particularly awesome. So, what a privilege it is on behalf of the Charles River Regional Chamber of Commerce to present the R.L. Tennant Award this year to the intrepid, the wonderful, the indefatigable, the amazing Linda Sloan Kaye. That concludes my remarks. Linda follows in a long line of distinguished civic and business leaders, recipients of this very prestigious award, most notable among them her own father, founder of Century Bank, Marshall Sloan. May his memory always be for a blessing. Linda will likely credit her dad as her teacher and her role model, accolades that he richly deserves. But Linda's greatness as a leader is not just as a tribute to her mentors. It is in her unparalleled ability to accomplish the difficult and still have time and fortitude to do the impossible. As longtime chair of the Chamber's Governance Committee, she is responsible for recruiting almost every single leader on the board of this, the fastest growing, most successful, without equal Chamber of Commerce in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. She did what the great ones do. She called me and so many others and said simply, I need you, and the community needs you. And we all said to her and to the work that needed to be done, I'm in. And by the way, as you heard Greg mention, she led the efforts to recruit Greg Riebman, who, when I say, is the single best professional leader of a Chamber of Commerce east of the Pacific Ocean. You all respond, since I'm also a rabbi, by saying amen. Greg is the most successful, wonderful professional leader of any Chamber of Commerce east of the Pacific Ocean. Amen. Thank you. We will move on without a hallelujah. Linda answered the call when the chamber leadership said, "Linda, we need you to lead us to chair our board." Ironically, that was just before that virus. What was that virus? Where's the hospital, folks? That virus arrived. And as an old Jewish expression says, people plan and God laughs. During her tenure at the most challenging of times for so many of our businesses, she led the fundraising to ensure that all staff at the chamber could stay employed and the chamber's invaluable work could continue. Linda then oversaw the expansion of the Newton-Nieder Chamber of Commerce into Watertown and Wellesley and the successful rebranding of the Charles River Regional Chamber of Commerce. And as great leaders do, she led by saying always, "Follow me." She directed the opening of Century Bank in Newton Center, one of the 28 branches of what was the largest family-controlled bank in New England with over $7 billion in assets. As the vice chair of the bank's board and myriad other senior professional roles, Linda and her colleagues were renowned for a reputation of integrity, professionalism, and philanthropic generosity that made so many of us clients also become friends, friends that became like family. Linda taught us all that leading in business also means accepting civic leadership responsibility. It is not either or, because Linda's definition of success is both and. There is an ancient piece of Jewish wisdom from a book called The Teachings of Our Ancestors, or literally, The Teachings of Our Fathers, known as Pirkei Avot, and it is especially an appropriate source for Linda on this very special day. It includes a 2,000-year-old prediction that envisioned this very moment by asking and answering two questions. Quote, "Who is truly wise? The one who learns from all people." End quote. Linda, you embody that teaching with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And the second question it asks, quote, "Who is truly honored?" End quote. The one who honors all of us. Linda, you honor and inspire all of us in receiving this award today. Friends and colleagues, the 2022 R.L. Tennant Award honoree, our leader, our teacher, my teacher and friend, Linda Sloan Kay. We'll put it right here so you know where it is. That's for you.
You know, this is one of those moments that I remember when my kids got married. I was given a bit of advice that step away, just look around, take it all in. And that's truly what I want to do right now, is just take this moment and take it all in. So, Mark, thank you. Your words were just beyond my imagination to hear someone speak about me in that way. So I'm so honored that you were chosen to present this award to me. And it was such a privilege to work beside you in the chamber. Thank you. Thank you all for this huge honor. Words can't describe my emotion to be able to share this with my dad, who I know is here. As a matter of fact, I heard someone's phone ring, and I thought maybe that was him calling. Marshall Sloan, who received this in 2016. I remember the day Barry Brown gave him the award, and I know how much it meant to him. And I truly believe my dad is looking down right now and smiling with a lot of pride. My dad taught me, wherever your business is located, be immersed in the community. So when I was asked to join this board, probably about 15 years ago, more or less, there was no question in my mind this was where I wanted to plant my feet and grow my connections. My career grew as I expanded my network at this chamber. I developed such meaningful relationships with people I truly consider to be lifelong friends. I encourage all of you young professionals that are out here today, get involved, stay involved, because my experience has been you do get out of it what you put into it, and then some. Within a few years after joining the board, I was then asked to head up the governance committee, which I thoroughly enjoyed. My responsibilities included building a vital and energetic board. I was never too shy to ask the influencers of our region to come join the greatest group of thoughtful and smart leaders who were entrenched within the cities and towns we serve. A special thank you to all and every board member over the years who gave me their support and said yes. In 2020, I took over as chair of the board. Who would have thought my term would have started as soon as the pandemic began? It could have been a nightmare experience for me, but with Greg at the helm, along with the Chamber's exceptional staff and an executive committee who I leaned on often, we figured out how to be better than ever and serve the business community during the most difficult times. I deeply admire all the board members I've worked with, but a very special shout out to my fellow executive board members. I never in a million years thought I would receive this award. To be recognized and respected by your peers is the greatest compliment. Thank you, Chris Teachout, John Rufo, Jay Spencer, Sam Sherman, Dan Brent, and Tali Golan. I want to also say thanks to Greg. Where's Greg sitting? There you are. Not only has Greg been an effective and brilliant president and CEO for 10+ years, but has been so incredibly supportive of me, and I truly value his friendship. And since Greg gave me 4 minutes, I'm gonna just finish by saying, there's one more group I need to acknowledge, and that's my table of family and friends. My husband of 37 years, and truly my best friend, Jonathan. My daughter, Rachel. My son-in-law, Franklin. My daughter-in-law, Brooke, who's married to my son, Josh, who is traveling at the moment, and he's sorry he couldn't be here. My dear friend Liz Berkowitz and Frank Dardino, my past Century Bank colleague and dear friend Paul Evangelista, of course Mark Sokol, and my new friend Lily Rabinoff Goldman. Thank you all. I am beyond grateful for this honor and will always hold dear the memories of serving on this extraordinary board. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Linda. I want to just say we had many, many, many nights and afternoons of conversations during those darkest days of the pandemic, and I'm so appreciative that you were there for us through it all. So thank you. One more round of applause, please, for Linda. Joe Campanello, do you want to come up? So we're going to get moving on our program. Really appreciate that we have our sponsors with us today. On behalf of our sponsors, we always like to welcome up Joe Campanello to say hello and introduce our speaker today. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg, and congratulations, Linda, again on a well-deserved award. Can anyone hear me? I hope so. Anyway, so it's great to see everyone back out again. And it's even greater to see our guest here today, Jeff Soak, who will help us all this traffic that's now we have to deal with in our communities and whatnot. If book sales and video views are any indication, today's guest speaker, Jeff Speck, may be the most listened to city planner in the world. Suburban Nation, which Jeff co-wrote, was a best-selling planning title over the past several decades. The Wall Street Journal called it the Urbanist Bible. His award-winning book, Walkable City, published in 2012, was a dominant planning title of its decade. It was named the second best urban planning book of all time. Next month, Jeff will release the 10th anniversary edition of Walkable City with over 100 new pages. And his TED Talks and YouTube videos have received more than 5 million views. I promised Greg I wouldn't ask you guys, what can we help you build? But I will ask you to join us in welcoming Jeff Speck to... Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I had a oh no is not the word, but a oh blank moment riding here this morning and realizing, what I do, and I talk all over the world really, but mostly in the U.S. And my job typically is to go into a community and speak truth to power and give them like the hard news and then leave and burn whatever bridges need to be burned so that they can make change once I'm gone. And since I'm gone, it has no impact on me. I just go to the next city. But I happen to live here. And I grew up in Belmont and lived in Miami for a decade, DC for a decade, Italy for a while. But when my family and I were looking to pick our forever home 9 years ago, we decided to come back to Boston. We live in Brookline, and I do a lot of work now in this community as well as around the world. But I didn't make my show realizing that I'm going to be staying here. So I'll ask for your forgiveness in advance. Also, I'm calling this talk Let's Get Specific because I spoke here 5 years ago, and Greg asked for an update, said what's new, what's different, and that's great, and that's what I've done for you today. But I realize there's twice as many people here as there were. Many of you haven't heard me speak before, and I'll apologize that you're not getting the usual show. You're getting something that's really, not the 101. It's more like the 233 of urban planning in Boston, or particularly in this part of Boston. So we're calling it Towards a More Walkable Newton, Needham, Wellesley, and Watertown. And as the chamber grows, this slide will get longer and longer. So the talk I usually give is two different talks. Sometimes I give both, one or the other. It's called The Walkable City, as my book is, and I like to talk about why we need our cities to be more walkable and how to make our cities more walkable. The why we need it part is the story of how I learned as an urban planner that there were three other groups, the economists, the environmentalists, and the epidemiologists who were all arguing for the same stuff that we were arguing for, but much more effectively. And there's extremely powerful arguments, strong economic arguments, strong, of course, environmental arguments and health arguments around why we need to make our places more walkable. What's great is that most people understand these now, and they become central to the discourse. However, if you want to hear that talk, it is available on TED.com. And if you go to TED and look up my name, which is SPECK, you will see it there. I'd love it if you would watch that. The how to do it part is also that's kind of the 101 that I'm mostly skipping today. But I talk about what's called the general theory of walkability, a little tongue-in-cheek. But we ask, in America, in which driving is so cheap and so easy, and we don't pay the full cost of it by a long shot, how do you get people to make the choice to walk? And the answer is that the walk needs to be useful, it needs to be safe, it needs to be comfortable, and it needs to be interesting. And there's a lot to be said in each of those categories, so I encourage you to watch that TED Talk, which is also available online. But we're going to skip right to the serious stuff. Now, before I get into your communities, that's how they say it in Maine, right? 2 projects from away. So I wanted to show you 2 projects in 2 other places that I think are pretty inspiring. One I had nothing to do with, but some friends of mine did it, Moulin Polyzoides. This is Lancaster Street in Lancaster, California, which you can see what it was like. It's what you call a strode. It doesn't know whether it's a street or a road. High speed, shopping was not working, and they did this to it. And the cost of doing that was a massive $11.2 million, which is, that's not a small amount of money. When this was completed, injury crashes went down by half, pedestrian crashes went down 78%, pedestrian activity doubled, 57 new businesses opened, 800 new housing units were built, 2,000 new jobs arrived, and the estimated economic impact was $282 million. And I'm always telling communities, in most cases with their streets, because we want to do things fast, I say, don't rebuild, restripe. But in this case, a limited investment made a huge difference. Now, I show you this one because we have the data. We don't have the data in this project that I worked on. This is the Monon Boulevard in Carmel, Indiana. There's 140 roundabouts in Carmel, Indiana. The mayor is a bit of a town planning nut. And he brought me in to work on what was a trail, the Monon Trail. It was a rails to trail. It was much beloved in the community. This is all it was, but it's a long trail that reaches down to Indianapolis. And the question was how to develop the area around it, how to create economic impact within the community. And I had the audacity to suggest that we should put cars around the nature trail. So there's actually, as you can see, it's a boulevard now with 1 lane of travel in each direction, cars parked, as well as all the other amenities that you might want to see there, recognizing that that would make it a front door and not some sort of back door. Here's one of the renderings from the plan, which if you zoom in, it's always fun, to see what happened. But Jan Gehl, the famous Scandinavian planner, came in, and his team did the landscape. And I finally got to go back to it just a few months ago for the first time, and it's just amazing to see, all the business activity, all the energy, all the money that has come to surround this space, because it's a complete space for walking, for biking, for dining, for even driving in the heart of that downtown. So I wanted to show you those to inspire you as we now move into Newton, Needham, Wellesley, and Watertown. Let's start with Newton, where I've spent most of my professional time here. It's very nice to see. By the way, as a city planner, you count in 20s. So every plan is like a 20-year plan. And it's a blink of the eye in planner time, 20 years. And I always try to remember that when something I proposed 5 years ago is just starting. But in Newton, Newton as a community has been talking for a long time about Washington Street. And I was very pleased to see this news in the Globe, and the Globe interviewed, I don't know, is Chuck Tanowitz here today? I don't even know him, but he was featured in the Globe for saying, what you just described to me is a horrifying hellscape about Washington Street, which is kind of what we put in our original report. So we've been looking at this for a long time. The very first time I presented the chamber, which was 5 years ago, we showed this vision. And so the town, here's where I start to get in trouble. The city is embarking upon this new vision. I can tell you, we've completed the vision, and we're going to show it to you now, 5 years ago. But obviously it needs to be a public process. It needs to bring everyone in. We did something, just kind of quietly and privately, so it doesn't count. So I'm joking that the job is done. But taking the existing conditions and widening sidewalks, narrowing the number of lanes to what the traffic actually demands, and then this wonderful opportunity here, you know, where it curves away, where Washington Street curves away from the Pike, and there's this useless green space that can instead be consolidated up against the neighborhood and become a park within that community. That's one opportunity in Newton. You probably are all aware of the 5 years or so that we've been working on Riverside. Most of you know it has been approved. It is moving forward. This was the plan originally. For those less familiar, it's 10 acres. It's 1,000 parking spaces. It's a big field of parking up against a train maintenance yard. At the end of the Green Line, a very important site. You can see the Green Line coming in on the right side of this image. And here's the fun little fade to the plan that was the initial plan for this project, that I want to show you the changes now between the old plan and the new plan. You can see a few changes as I flick back and forth here between the latest version, the approved version, and the earlier version. You see the parking lot in the upper left has been removed. It's been consolidated with the parking lot at the center. There was also parking under the lower left building that has been removed. The parking lot has been skinnied up, so now the upstairs up against the Main Street, which you see right here, is now lined by buildings completely on every story. Also, you'll notice what was a housing tower, not tower, but a mid-rise, let's call it, I guess in Newton that's a tower. A housing tower against the highway and some taller buildings have been brought down and replaced with, office, 2 lab office buildings in this location. The housing was shifted to this corner where a hotel was going to go. There is no longer a hotel in the scheme. But the other important thing you see in this image is that it is much more cooked. And we're actually fully into architecture in almost all of these buildings. So the first thing to notice is that the height has come down in this location, and the entry now are these mid-rise buildings up against Grove Street as you come in. This is the experience coming in on Grove Street. And then as you go further along Grove Street, along the front of the development, this is the square then, which is up by the transit station. And these are buildings developed by Cube 3 architects that are surrounding the square. And then as you go further down the Main Street, you see that long row of buildings that's hiding the parking lot from view. The first and most important move in this project was to take the surface parking lot and make it a structured parking lot that freed up 80% of the site, but also hid the rail yard. The second step, of course, was to hide the parking lot. So that's what you see happening on this edge, and a series of buildings that march down the street from the station now. We're working our way west down the Main Street, and we have apartments that are off a hallway but that look like row houses. We have an amphitheater green that runs down the side of the hill from Grove Street and is faced by a building that reflects its width. We get deeper into the plaza to the west, and actually I'm going to show you the view now looking from this building that way down to the end of the plaza. There's a nice little cut up the side of the hill that I'll show you again that provides access. See that? Provides access from the street down to the square. That's what that looks like right there. So all these buildings have been developed into architecture and are ready to go. Finally, I wanted to make a poll because, you know, these things are the work of many hands and people have different feelings. And when we first drew these townhouses, I drew them as lots of different colors. And I thought, that's cute. You know, I went to Harvard where they teach you to have taste. And they don't let you do things that are cute, because that's not cool. But I like cute. And actually, my college thesis was on the difference between the taste of architects and the taste of the general public. And I've been at this long enough now that I side with the general public. So my question is, this is a project I helped design in Washington, D.C. And I like places like this. You know, you might, Washington, D.C., Charleston, no, you're not supposed to vote yet. You know, you might say this is one of the most charming streets in America. Oh, look, the most charming streets in America. And my question is, do you want this to be one color or do you want it to be lots of different colors? And I've really prejudiced the crowd. But I understand that there are different tastes here. So please, if you like it to be all one color, please clap. Okay. If you'd like it to be lots of different colors, please clap. Okay. We'll do whatever we want. Next. And then I wanted to also mention one thing. If you zoom in on this slide, you'll see the bike lane. These are the new bike lanes that they're doing, that George Proakis has been doing in Somerville, that they're doing in Cambridge. This is the new standard now, the bike lane out of the street. And if you're ever rebuilding a curb, of course, that's what we're doing. And we'll be doing that at Riverside. And thanks, in fact, to the city itself insisted on that, as well as the designers. I wanted to also bring up in Newton that there's a very interesting and effective project being done now, the Village Center rezoning plan. It's being done by UTIL, who happens to be in Boston, but they're one of the best design firms in the world. They're looking into building footprint and building height and roof form. This is called a form-based code, and it replaces traditional statistics-based zoning with form-based zoning so that buildings either look like they belong, at the heart of a city or a little bit further out or in a more suburban area. And you notice that the buildings are different heights, the roofs are different shapes, and then we take a place like Newton Center and we assign those different heights to the different parts of different forms to the different parts of the neighborhood. And I just want to say that I've been observing this effort. I'm not involved in it, but it's very impressive, and I think it's going to go well. Speaking of Newton Center, I just want to bring up again, the last time I spoke here, I called it Newton Center or the Central Parking Lot or Central Parking Lot to meet the Newton spelling, and that it feels like a Walmart. And Newton's an amazing city. I grew up going to Newton and loving everything about it except the parking lot in the middle, and you can do a lot better. And it's time to rethink this very important position in Newton. And I did a plan for it that I'm not going to show you. But it still looks great the way it is. Oh, sorry. There we go. Now, but maybe this is inspiring, and maybe we can use this example to start. Now, let's move on to Needham. I have a little reading, but I'm short on time, so I'm not going to do my reading. And I'll talk about that in a bit. But I was speaking about, in the 100 pages that I'm adding to my book, Walkable City, that comes out in 2 weeks, I talk about this new Massachusetts program that you're probably well aware of, which is placing high density or higher density, moderate density, more housing at transit stops. And all of your communities have opportunity for this, but perhaps none more prominently than Needham. With its train stops and its centers, really two traditional town centers. They almost look the same. It took me a minute to figure it out. But two traditional town centers with rail stops, but also, look at that, with parking lots, right? Right up what should be a beautiful edge to your town green is a surface parking lot. And of course, as we learned at Riverside, wherever you see a surface parking lot is an opportunity to densify, perhaps structure the parking, but bring in more housing. Needham is really well primed to do that. The other thing I want to mention, as I mentioned in all my talks, my mentor Andre Stwani used to show this slide, and he'd say, the typical road to the typical subdivision in America is now wide enough to allow you to experience the curvature of the earth. And what has happened is roads have gotten wider and wider, and traffic speeds have gotten faster and faster. And we know for a fact that a 10-foot lane is a 35-mile-an-hour lane, and a 12-foot lane is a 70-mile-an-hour lane. And yet so many of our communities still have 12-foot lanes in them. 10 feet, according to NACTO, is the proper width for a lane on an urban street. And many of you are restriping your streets on a regular basis. Some of you have plans like the earlier plans that I encountered for Highland Avenue, and here it is straight from the desk of the engineer, and you are, I hear word, because I was speaking with the city manager, and this is now under reconsideration, situation, but you were planning to rebuild Highland Avenue with 12-foot lanes. I'm calling it Dangerous Highland Ave. As I tried to build this on Street Mix, a little note came up that said, this segment might be too wide. Whenever you put in a 12-foot lane, it tells you that brilliantly. And it was fun to read the now 20-year-old bicycle plan for Needham. But it says 3 feet is the minimum width for a bicycle lane. Can you imagine a 3-foot bike lane? 12 feet is needed for a car lane. Thus, a road that is 30 foot wide can have 2 12-foot car lanes and 2 3-foot bicycle lanes. This needs an update, but it just reminds us that that was the standard for so long. The engineers did not know it. They did not know that a 12-foot lane was more dangerous than a 10-foot lane, but we know it now. So I showed one proposal, one of many possible proposals, where you see on Highland Ave that if you make the lanes 10 feet wide instead of 12 feet wide, also because there's so many parking lots against it, it does not need to have parking on both sides. You can fit in a protected two-way bike facility on one side of Highland Avenue. Now, I was speaking at the public library, the Needham Public Library, to a small crowd that I was trying to turn into activists, and we were, Webster Street was brought to my attention as a real problem. Students have died. It's right in front of the high school, being hit by cars on Webster Street, and people wonder why. Because the engineering profession is so far behind. And we can't blame we can blame previous administrations who aren't in this room. That's easy. We can also blame the fact that it took a long time for engineers to learn that local streets are very different from highways. On a highway, a wider lane is safer because people set their speed based on the speed limit. But in a local road, you actually set your speed based on the friction and the perception that you might hit something. And so narrow lanes are safer. This is a 17-foot lane, 2 17-foot lanes in Webster Street. They asked how they might restripe it. I said, start with this. My proposal, one of many, is simply make the lanes 10 feet wide, put in ample 6-foot bike lanes, and then you have room for a little buffer. Like, you know what a parking lot stop is right in front of your wheels? Put something there to protect the bike lanes. This would drastically change the speeds of cars on Webster Street, and also notice there's no center line. Why? Well, in England, they did several studies, and they found that when you remove the center line from a street, the average speed of vehicles drops by 7 miles an hour. And now we're removing center lines wherever we go. So that's important too. So that's just one proposal. I know there are others under consideration. The main point is if you stop making it look like a highway, cars will go slower. Let's move on. Wellesley. I don't know Wellesley as well. It does have one of the most beautiful campuses in the world. I was just there the other night, and of course I used to visit growing up. It was brought to my attention the wonderful COVID-era sidewalk dining intervention that took place on Central Street that I understand is being considered to be made permanent, and that the merchants who benefited from it so much when it was put in seem to not want it there anymore. So I think that deserves more attention. Things like this, when they come to cities, generally are very effective in bringing downtowns back to life. And then also a plan, which I was pleased to hear this morning, is under reconsideration. But I was given this plan for Central Street, and they made the mistake, the architects made the mistake of putting a scale on it. So I measured the street and found that the proposal has 14-foot lanes. Now, if a 12-foot lane is 70 miles an hour, I don't know what you need a fast car. But 14 feet, that's not acceptable, not safe. And then this part had actually a 24-foot lane, and I'm not sure what that's about. But this would be my endorsement that be reconsidered. And then finally, Watertown. This is the most fun for me. Watertown's the most fun for me for several reasons. One, because it has a new city manager who's one of the best planners in America, George Proakis. Yes, you can clap for George Proakis. George is such a good planner that I have him co-teach my Harvard class every summer. He happens to now be the city manager of Watertown, which means that we can see some amazing things. We're going to see some amazing things in Watertown. But the most amazing one, which I'm ready to start, I took 1 hour, forgive me, off the clock, George, 1 hour. to investigate the worst part of Watertown, which is also the heart of Watertown, which is Watertown Square, which is this giant tarmac that, based on pre-21st century traffic design, has a light over every lane, a lane for every turning motion, an understanding that we need to have signals everywhere, and once you put signals everywhere, of course, you have stacking everywhere, and the roads need to get wider and wider and wider, and that's what happened to Watertown Center. And we have a new technology that has to do with using roundabouts, that has to do with slow, steady, unsignalized flow that we're starting to use in more and more places around the country that can allow us to do this. Now, let me do that again. So we can about double the amount of open space. And by the way, some of this open space could even become ground for new shops or businesses. It doesn't all have to be green, but given the temperature here in New England, I think it will be all green. But notice a roundabout at each end, and then actually one-way flow in a counterclockwise motion around the edges allows it to be much calmer traffic, allows the traffic should move through it more quickly as not speed, but efficiency than it currently does, and we can have a tremendous square in the middle of Watertown Square. So that's the 1 hour plan. I'm sure there could be a better version if more time was spent. The roundabout technology, this one's from Europe, gets better and better and more pedestrian friendly and bike friendly, and that could easily be applied in Watertown. And the great example, now about 20 years old, if you want to see something really cool, get on the YouTube after this event and look up this video called Poynton Regenerated, about a town center that looked a lot like the British version of Watertown Square. Just cars backed up, dangerous to pedestrians, dangerous to cyclists, miserable for motorists, and they went in and put in a new shared space, unsignalized paving solution. Almost none of this has been done in the US, but I think it's going to start in Watertown. So I encourage you to see that film. And that is the extent of what I wanted to show you this morning. However, I couldn't help noticing Jake Auchincloss tweeting Jonathan Burke, tweeting that Cambridge has become the first Massachusetts city to fully abolish parking minimums. Buffalo has done it. About 4 different major American cities have abolished their parking minimums. And the parking minimum, the off-street, right, the on-site developer parking minimum, as Donald Shoup, the Dean of American Parking, says, is a fertility drug for cars. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you require it, it will be provided, people will park, and they will drive. So the very first thing you can do as communities to encourage more walkable, bikeable environments in your walkable areas, in your downtowns, is to eliminate, as Cambridge has done, the on-site parking requirement. I like to end by sharing resources. I mentioned the 2 TED Talks. There they are again. I've written a bunch of books, and I don't want you to buy Walkable City. Please don't buy this book, because in 2 weeks it's coming out, a whole new version. So I actually don't have it here to sign today. I didn't want you buying something that was obsolete. But the new version coming out in 2 weeks has 100 new pages. It has an introduction by Jeanette Sadik-Khan, and you can pre-order it on Amazon, so I would encourage that if you so wish. There it is. We added a bike lane that says 10th Anniversary Edition. And then the book that I am signing today is my very practical book, Walkable City Rules. That's all the it's 101 things that you yourself can do if you're at all active in this space. If you're doing anything to do with streets or cities, or you just care about them, I encourage you to read this. Each page is a rule. For example, when you replace signals with always stop signs, the number of severe pedestrian injury crashes drops by 68%. So it's full of information like that. I hope you'll review it. And then finally, people travel all over the world to come to my and George Proakis' 2-day course at Harvard every year. We've been doing it for, I think, 10 years now. This is not the first one. It's in June, and you just spend 2 days with us at Harvard, and you're also conveniently located. Please talk to me, come up to me if you want to learn more about that. I do want to thank today's sponsors, especially Needham Bank. They told me not to do it, but Mark Development is the best client I've ever had, and they're right here in Newton. So I want to thank Mark Development. They really know what they're doing. And then Greg asked me to acknowledge the newest member of the Chamber, who happens to be also the newest business on Commonwealth Avenue in Newton, and that's my wife. So, and her business is called Bubbles and Brews Mobile Vintage Italian Bar Service. Right here in Newton, Massachusetts. So thank you, Alice, also, and every 5 years, so I'll see you in 2027. Thank you.
Oh, Jeff, thank you. Can our panel please come up? Jeff will be outside in the lobby at a table signing copy of Walkable City Rules, and encourage you to stop and say hello to Jeff at the conclusion. And we will send everyone a link to when his new book is out that I intended today, so you'll have a chance to get the updated version of Walkable Cities. If our panel could join us, if someone could move this from the hotel, that would be great. So right now we want to dive right in. I want to talk to the group that, as I mentioned, I like to think of as our municipal all-stars. Look at this. Our municipal all-stars do everything in their communities, including move podiums. You know, that is the kind of community that we live in. These folks are not afraid to roll their sleeves up. So we have a couple microphones. So let's give one of these to, let's start with, I would actually like to let George say hello since he's the new guy here, and literally the guy. But George, it's been, what, 2 months? 2.5 months. If you could just tell us a little briefly about your experience coming into a new community. You came from Somerville. You've had some other experience. Is that working for you?
It just lit up. Okay, yes. It's like it just lit up. Now it's working for me. Thanks. Yes, after 2.5 months, it's an excellent and exciting new experience to both be in Watertown, to be a city manager. What is not a new experience for me is trying to follow Jeff Speck after having participated in the second day of his class for so many years, which is always a bit challenging, especially when he challenges us, and I really appreciate that. But it's great to be here. Watertown is an amazing community. I've had a chance to spend a lot of time over the last 2.5 months getting to know the council, a lot of people in the community, and start to focus on the things that we need to do next. I also usually when I start out a conversation about Watertown, I always mention that my predecessor, Mike Driscoll, did such an amazing job of creating a fiscally stable and well-run community that I start by inheriting a city that is in really great shape, that we are building a net zero LEED Platinum high school, which I think actually is our biggest and most important economic development goal right now, because it allows the opportunity to educate the next generation in a truly amazing building, and we're looking forward to keeping that moving and keeping that on track right now. It's a big part of what we're focused on.
Terrific. Thank you, George. And then I also, and I do want to get into talking about what Jeff had to say and how you all reacted to it, but I wanted to acknowledge the thing that's fairly obvious, which is that we have 3 women here. And we had mentioned in a pre-call, Kate had mentioned how that is not typical in municipalities across the Commonwealth. Can you give us a sense of, I think you cited some numbers of.
Sure. Nationwide, the people in the city manager role, which most of the world calls city manager, town manager in Needham, and something more complicated in Wellesley, as always. So represents between 12 and 18% women, and that's has actually gotten worse in Massachusetts rather than better, and I know that's something similar for the mayors.
Great. And we're fortunate to have these 3 women and this gentleman join us today. And Megan, I wanted to go to you now. Let's talk a little bit. I'd love to get your reaction to what Jeff Speck had to say. In particular, there were some ideas for Wellesley. Wellesley has been rethinking how to redo downtown. What did you see today? And tell us a little about what the town is up to in Wellesley.
I think he was 100% accurate in terms of looking at that downtown area. So that we did put a parklet up in that area. We found it's been highly successful. Yesterday was a good example. You know, I went out late in the afternoon, and there was probably 20 people there enjoying the day, having stopped at either restaurants for takeout or coffee, walking, biking. Our merchants, as Jeff had mentioned, there's a fair portion of them that don't find it to be a benefit. They feel that someone may have a $5 cup of coffee, but they're not going to then proceed to their store. And the traffic flow, given it's somewhat of a circuitous square, is interrupted. And so if people can't find parking, they feel that that's really a critical function for their businesses to work. As part of our redesign concept, we had 2 public meetings, and all we heard is, if I lose one parking spot, my business is going to die. And that's tough to combat, you know. And so we're trying to show, you know, if we revitalize and you get pedestrian movement, we have a lot of restaurants coming into town. But when you have restaurants, you need retail to stay open later to really gain the benefits of those individuals coming. So we're a work in progress, as you know, trying to build consensus on how to move forward, and I think it'll be an interesting yet long journey. And then it's the funding. So I think, as Jeff had mentioned, you know, the cost of doing these types of infrastructure projects is not insignificant, and so it's trying to balance that along with other projects in town, but trying to also keep promoting your businesses and trying to enhance them day by day.
Thank you. And Mayor Fuller, you've been involved with projects that Jeff's worked on more than anyone else, because Jeff has done a lot of work in Newton. How has that worked? What have you learned? What's the city thinking about in these terms?
We're grateful to have Jeff's ideas really seeping into Newton in a big way. You'll have to know I'm on a life journey here. Some of you know I grew up and was raised in Detroit. So I'm switching from the Motor City to the walkable city along the way. Jeff, you'll be pleased to know we have our first roundabout coming to the city of Newton soon, not far, right down Com Ave here. We've got, I invite all of you to come to Newtonville, and you're going to see how by changing the road design, how the sidewalks are built, what you do with trees and benches, and putting in a real parklet there between a Starbucks and a Cafe Nero, that it is so walkable, so vibrant, and check out the new restaurants while you're there.
Terrific. And George, you saw Jeff's idea done in an hour for Watertown Square. You ready to sign on?
I'll tell you what I am ready to sign on to. I'm ready to sign on to taking a fresh look at a number of things related to Watertown Square, and it's something that I had that I highlighted in my presentation to the City Council a couple of weeks ago. That the square as a whole has had a number of conversations about transportation, about zoning, about mixed-use housing growth, about what to do with the vacant city building that we have there, about how to best handle the spaces in our parking lots, and sort of pulling that all together and figuring out a solution. You know, it'll be interesting to see where that all goes, but I look forward to working with the community on strategies and you know, as I told my staff in my very first staff meeting, I like us to be abnormal, think of new ideas, be creative, and bring everything to the table. So Jeff's idea comes to the table as part of that conversation now, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Kate, your turn. So Needham Center, Jeff showed a little bit, but maybe there's just not as much housing in the center as there should be. Different way of thinking about parking lots, your reaction to what he said and what you're up to?
So I couldn't agree more with Jeff. I think there's great excitement in Needham right now about reimagining our infrastructure to really increase our housing, especially in the downtown. The thing about government is that everything takes so long. The 20-year plan, the first 10 years, by the time you get to the funding, you know, what you've planned is obsolete. So we had a downtown infrastructure improvement plan that they called a streetscape plan, which meant there was some planters. And this is me. I'm the opposite of George. I've been in Needham for 33 years and in this job for 21. So I own everything. But we're just really excited that people are excited about it. We were going to start moving on the second phase of our downtown plan. We put a huge brake on it and we said, what could it look like? We don't need the 70-mile-an-hour cars. The plan was created to get traffic through because the big complaint 10 years ago was traffic was so bad. So I think we're poised. We're doing a parking study to see whether we really need the parking. I love the analogy that you used about the fertility drug. I think that there's going to be a lot of community input. I know our merchants are worried about losing parking, and I think we have to find the balance on that. But I think there's a lot of interest in doing that in Needham right now.
Terrific. And I think that's a nice transition to talk about housing. And as many of you know, the Boston Foundation released its Greater Housing Report Card yesterday. We continue to flunk. We, meaning our suburban communities all across the metro region. And in particular, Mayor Fuller, I know you're part of the Metro Mayors Coalition, which had made a commitment to 185,000 new units of housing by 2030. The report said you're not even on pace to do half of that. I'd love to understand really your thoughts about housing and how we get the housing we need for our jobs, for our families, for our people to live in.
If you look at the report card closely, you'll see that the city that is really building is Boston. For the rest of us, I still call it 128, I think that says something about me, but within 128, it is much slower. I am proud of the city of Newton, however. Jeff Speck is involved with Riverside. There is also the Northland development. Those are the two largest additions of housing that are coming in the history of Newton, and they're well designed. They are going to be walkable new neighborhoods. And I am also proud that in this last 5 years, the most new affordable housing ever in the history of Newton has been permitted. So we're moving forward, and Deb Crossley is somewhere here. I want to give out a shout out to her and the rest of the city council, because we are moving forward with, I think, well-designed zoning for our village centers that will be mixed use, housing above retail and restaurants and offices that I think will work for Newton and address the important housing needs that regionally we need.
Terrific. And I want to hear from Kate and Megan in particular about that idea, but also the study also showed that new Black and Latino homeowners are concentrating where they move and where they buy to a small number of towns on the north of Boston and south of Boston, not in our communities. How do we address that? How do we make our communities more welcoming?
I think that has been a real challenge. I think, through both our schools as we're bringing in families, we have concerted efforts for diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives and staff members. I think our towns have all been working to enhance the welcoming nature. I think it's also, trying to get a diverse array of businesses into our community to make sure that culturally people feel accepted. And I think it's also looking at different strategies in terms of getting diverse individuals to run for office, which also then shows a reflection of what your community really is. In Wellesley, in particular, we have a growing Asian population. So we've been working really hard with our Chinese American network, along with our Wellesley Chinese Learning School, to make sure that we can incorporate different one, if it's a language barrier into our meetings or communications, and making sure that we're just overall trying to be in any meeting or decision-making more inclusive.
So many of you know Needham Town Meeting and many of our boards and committees, and led by our select board and a working group, Needham Unite Against Racism Initiative, passed a race equity vision for the town. And so as part of that, what we're embarking on this year, along with lots of training opportunities, incorporating goals for staff, is so a series of targeted focus groups to try to determine where people feel welcome, where people are accessing services, and how we might take the next steps to do that. Because I think we need to be communities that where you can see what you can be, right? So that we need to people. The only way people are going to move to communities, and I'm assuming they're moving to the communities you're mentioning, because folks are there and they're saying this is a welcome community. So we have to find ways to make ourselves more welcoming.
And let me, I'd be happy to hear your thoughts, Mayor and George, about this as well. But George, let me go to you. Too many people, and I think your experience is good because you come from Somerville, you come from a community that has done a lot more on these things than others. Too many people have an outsized voice about development that will never live in those developments. How do you make sure that the things we're building and the conversations we're having aren't just focused on what the people who live in the community think we should build, but really what the people who want to move here are looking for?
Well, I think that through many years, I've always said that one of the roles of a city planner and a city planning department is to make sure that they reflect, understand, and incorporate the voices that aren't in the room, no matter what meeting that is and group of people might be there. At the same time, it's obviously very important to hear from the people who do show up and do participate and are in the room and understand their perspectives. But certainly my experience in Somerville, we did a lot of efforts in our big picture planning, in our long range planning, our neighborhood plan work, to try to dig deeper into getting community voices, to understand more about people who don't necessarily come out to meetings and where their focus might be, get more diverse voices in the room who probably are more reflective of the type of voices of the people who might move into new developments when we bring those new developments along, and build consensus in a larger group. I think there's a lot still to be done in that area in terms of being able to sort of find and understand the voices in the community who aren't necessarily in a certain moment there when we're talking about a certain project. I also think it's important to have these conversations on a bigger picture, talking about citywide planning or neighborhood planning, rather than just focusing on that moment in time when that one development's in the room and we're all saying, is this good, is this bad? If you can relate it against planning work that was done at a larger scale and that involved more robust community conversation, hopefully by the time you get down to the board meeting, there's always a talk about whether or not a dumpster ends up under somebody's window, but you're not talking about, oh my goodness, this building is 10 times the height that we want it to be, because hopefully you had those conversations early on and created a regulatory system that reflects that beforehand.
Mayor, I'd love your thoughts on that. How do we make our communities, that the new projects we build, the new housing we build, be good for the needs of people who don't live here now, rather than giving an outsized voice to everyone who lives there about what we think we need?
So yes, we are consciously in our planning department. There's a shout out somewhere to Barney Heath in this room, who is our planning director, who is very consciously in this zoning process, for example, lifting up and seeking out the voices of low-income residents, people of color, LGBTQ plus residents. But I'm going to gently redirect your comment, if I may. It is important to listen carefully to the people who already are living in Newton and live in those neighborhoods. Those voices matter a lot. They matter a lot to me. It's doing, I'll use George's terminology, making sure we're hearing from everyone. We are consciously doing that. But please know the current residents in those neighborhoods also matter a lot. They know the neighborhood well. We had a meeting last week in Zoomland, West Newton Square. We invested a lot in trying to make it more walkable, more bikeable. And some residents are concerned, is traffic too slow and too congested? And is it actually safer? The data shows, yeah, the crashes have really declined It is slower, it is more walkable, but you know what? Those neighborhoods were right. We do need to fine tune it. There's things we could do even better. So outsized rings a little bit wrong. I think it's lifting up other voices and making sure they're at the table.
I understand. On the other hand, our employers are desperate to hire. We're desperate to bring people in. We're desperate to diversify our community. And to do that means accommodating and welcoming new people. And I know you understand that as well as anybody here. So thank you. I'm going to jump a little bit around. Let's talk about where we've just been the last 2-3 years of the pandemic. I'd love everyone's thoughts on what went right and what went wrong on a municipal level in terms of helping manage the pandemic. How are our municipalities better now, maybe stronger, smarter than they were before that? What are the lessons we learned from that? Do you want to start, Kate?
Sure. I'll take that one from a livability perspective. Somebody had a brilliant idea to put up a tent on the Needham Town Common in the peak of the early days of the pandemic, and it was probably the spark of what is going to be the future of walkable Needham. That tent was used every day. The select board in a community that never allowed wine before 10 years ago, allowed people to bring alcohol out of restaurants as long as it was bought with food from the restaurants and eat on the common. And there were people eating on that common for the 8 months that they could do that. People would eat lunch outside because that's where they could feel comfortable meeting with people. Our town clerk was one of the only town clerks around who would still do weddings, and the weddings would be on the front steps of town hall, and everyone who was sitting at the tent would applaud. And it was a wedding a week, and I think we just really got a great sense of what it could look like, and we totally redesigned our $1 million redesign of our town common, which yes is coming. I think what we found didn't work was the town deciding where to put the parklet, and we put up a couple of parklets that were beautiful. Pro tip, you have to get really good umbrellas. Don't buy the ones at Home Depot, they'll be gone in a week. But nobody used them because they weren't where people wanted to be. So what we learned is we have to figure that out first. Jay Spencer, who is here maybe or was, his parklet, never a seat. So it was in the right place, and the parklet that we put somewhere else, we have to learn how to listen to people and figure out what that would work. So.
I couldn't agree more about the parklets. I think it's been a great advantage to have outdoor dining in general. It's really activated at a time when you are so low in terms of people coming out to the commercial district. To see people there really enticed more people to come, and that was really successful. The other thing in COVID was really making that connection of being outside to get to destinations. We had our trail system was literally, we were getting comments, there's too many people out on the trails, which, we have a great trail that connects, is a 2-mile trail, the Fuller Brook Park Trail, which runs parallel to Washington Street. And we saw so many people out there. Now, to try and make that connection with the parklets, to have a visual cue of, oh, there's the commercial district to come out, was successful. It led us also to contemplate our sustainable mobility plan, because we already had people outside using other modes, whether it be bike or walking, and to try and really latch on to that. We've seen such success. How can you build on that? And then we've also tried to just put everything online. We're a work in progress on that, but to try and make it easier for our businesses applying for permits or a change in licensure. We also really have loosened up the alcohol regulations, which has been a benefit to our restaurants. We've seen influx of restaurants from that. We modified our seating requirements, and it's been very beneficial to us, for the town as a whole, to really step back and think about where we want to be in the future. On that front, there's been a lot of positive changes to our businesses.
Ditto. And I love that between Alice and Jeff Speck, we have the alcohol and the walking, so it's all good. Let me just broaden it a little bit to also just go to pandemic years that all of us lived through, which certainly in our business community, our nonprofits, city and town governments, incomplete information that changed frequently, literally life and death decisions going on, financial health as well as literally life and death types of things. Shifting now to a world with the divisiveness, the social media, I think sometimes bringing out our worst tendencies, the breakdown in journalism. What I think sharpened and became clear for us in the pandemic years is equally needed today and in the future. This coordination, collaboration, focus on creativity, communication, all those C words came to the forefront and I think are imprinted in our DNA. It was there before, but it's just, you can't do anything without that communication and collaboration and creativity. It's just essential to living in this world and trying to be leaders and good neighbors. And
My professional experience in the middle of the pandemic comes from my time in Somerville, where I was leading a team that included both a housing stability team in a community with a substantial group of folks constantly at risk of displacement and at kind of the edge of being able to afford rent, and leading a mobility team that was interested in building a more walkable and equitable city. And at that moment in time, I was shifting back and forth day to day from spending days trying to make sure that you could keep people in housing at the most vulnerable moments, and at the same time addressing how to help small businesses, particularly in our squares, get outdoor seating. And Somerville had a 5-step process for doing outdoor seating. In the beginning of the pandemic, we eliminated 4 of the steps in about a week and a half, and never put them back. So they're gone. Like, it's a 1-step, go to the city licensing board, 1-step process to do outdoor seating. And that was like just a huge shift. And we felt great about the opportunity at the same moment in time that we were also struggling with these housing issues. I'll say most significant, the one other most significant thing I want to mention about the sort of public conversations during the pandemic is moving online and now moving to hybrid meetings has offered us all sorts of very interesting opportunities. We were planning a neighborhood charrette in Assembly Square area in Somerville before the pandemic. We shifted it online and we're actually able to pull far more people from the neighborhood around into that process who wouldn't have come out to a meeting otherwise. In Watertown, we are really efficient at doing hybrid meetings where people can participate on Zoom and participate in the room and connect the technology back and forth, and give people more opportunities to engage. And oftentimes when you do like a small board meeting and you don't offer one or the other, everybody's like, well, why can't I do both? I always want to do both now. Like, so we've raised the bar on the possibilities for interaction and community process, and we'll keep it there. And I think that's going to be a long run good thing. If I can just say there's one negative, and I don't have to say this to a crowd in the business community without them probably completely agreeing. Everything's more expensive now, and that's becoming very difficult trying to build a high school, do more road work, and do all of the things that we want to accomplish, but we're committed to continuing to do it.
you can always propose an override.
Just kidding. Save it for that one.
So thank you for all that. A really good answer. And we're going to end on time, or we're going to try to end this quickly on time. And I have one more question, but I did want to say one thing. I wanted to give you all an opportunity. If there was like you were thinking you were coming here this morning, there's one thing I want to say to the business community. I want to make sure they understand here, or you didn't get to. You want to? Anybody have anything before I get to the last question?
You are holding it.
Well, I'll tell you, I really think we have a local merchants association, and I think the support that the chamber has given and really the expansion to a regional model is critical. I think in this day and age, when we're talking about housing and we're talking about transportation, these are not local issues. These are regional issues and these are state issues. And I think having just looking around the room, thinking about all the ideas alone that would be in this room to improve Wellesley businesses, Needham, Newton, Watertown, collectively, it is going to just improve the community as a whole. And we have to think regionally on everything we do in terms of the housing and in terms of commercial industry, in terms of lab space, how that's going to impact our businesses, our residential communities. And I look forward to having those conversations with people.
I would just say, please participate. Please give us your opinions. We do, like George said, we're trying to do everything with a hybrid model. But if you know, please give us your feedback early in our process about things that we're looking at in our downtowns and things that might be more controversial. We need all the voices early.
And I'll build on by saying state, regional, chamber, and then I'm going to say in a city of Newton with our 13 villages, micro as well. John Sisson, where are you in the room? John, back corner there, stand up, John. Economic development planner for Newton. He's also your concierge for what's going on in your block also, because we've got to do it at every single level.
I think a lot of the mayor made a lot of the key points. I would as well, that we need to really understand and address the getting to know and understanding the needs of businesses down to that block level. Watertown has had some amazing success in recent years with new development, with opportunities, with Arsenal Yards, with a number of opportunities to bring new lab buildings, new substantial businesses into the city. We look forward to continuing to do that. At the same time, I also look forward, I had a chance a couple of weeks ago to walk Coolidge Square and meet some of the retailers kind of on the block at the neighborhood level and hear their concerns going day to day. I hope to continue to do that in Watertown and meet more businesses, big and small, and understand the opportunities and the challenges and continue to work together.
Terrific, thank you. And as I said in the beginning, we're so fortunate to have 4 really well-run municipalities in the chamber. I am really lucky to have their chamber presidents who aren't nearly as lucky as I am to have 4 municipal leaders like this. So thank you all for your service, for being here today. As you know, this year, for the first time, the chamber launched a project we called Take a Trip Up the Charles. It was designed to help encourage people both from out of state or out of the country, but also the next town over or the town you live in, to visit and explore our 4 communities. I'd love to ask each of you to tell me one place in your community that you recommend the rest of us go visit sometime in your town. We'll start with Kate.
Sure, I would say something we call the Amity Path, which is a very short path around the Needham Reservoir at 500 Dedham Avenue. It is near the Charles. It is wooded. It is, in this season, the most beautiful place you can walk. You can walk it 5 times. You can walk it once. You can also fish.
You know, it's going to sound crazy, but you should check out the Wellesley Office Park because there is a terrific DCR path that runs directly along the Charles. We're in the process of just wrapping up construction of 350 residential units at the Nines, and there'll be further conversions of the Wellesley Office Park in the coming years. But it's such an interesting dynamic because you can park, walk, bike, and then there's a lovely trail that's ADA accessible. We see a lot of folks out there, you know, they may come down there with a stroller or even run because it's a really soft type of durable surface, and you would never believe it's there. And it's a really interesting trail connection, not far from Hemlock Gorge. So I would recommend checking it out.
Okay, in Newton, we have we are either the #1 or #2 most visited library in the state every year. There's a brand new, huge children's room. Thank you, Jake Auchincloss and President Biden, and because of it, the American Rescue Plan Act funds. We could fund our restaurants. We could do Newton Hires with Greg Riebman. We could help really vulnerable people with it. It also allowed us to put $2 million into a shovel-ready children's room that had completely stalled because of the pandemic. It's open, it's amazing, and you don't have to be young or a kid to go there.
I'll just, wrapping up a conversation with the Charles River Regional Chamber, I can't help but mention that in Watertown, a great place to visit is the paths around the river itself, and really enjoy the Charles River and everything that it has to operate. One of the things I love about where I work every day is that path is a block away from my office, and a great opportunity to just get out, be in nature so close to the middle of the city, have all of the amenities of Watertown Square and be able to wander a block away and be on the river in a completely different environment, and connect into Newton. That path those pieces of connections, we're going to keep on going and try to keep on connecting regional trails the best we can. But the river is an amazing resource and an amazing opportunity for us.
4 really great suggestions. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. Not just for their being here today, but for what they do for our communities. And a reminder, when you do visit those 4 sites and everything else, to shop and dine local. And thank all of you for being part of this chamber, for being here today. Linda, thank you so much. And everyone have a great day, and we will see you next time.